Jones.
Kia ora no tātou. Firstly, I stand to support, bizarre though it may sound, many of the sentiments expressed by the former Speaker, Dr. Nick Smith. And indeed, as he was on his feet, I shared with a colleague of mine that the thought that they should observe Dr. Smith outlining a case apparently about egregious wrongdoing, potential criminal liability, because this is one of the virtues of being in Parliament, the ability to outline before the colleagues of the House and indeed the public via the medium of the media those cases which warrant the attention of this House. Of course, the case that we should bear in mind, however, upon making those statements, facts have to be of a high order and that a remedy follows close behind. But the case that Dr. Nick Smith has outlined gives a great deal of impetus as to why we should support this bill. I was reading several days ago, sir, of the appointment of the receivers to the Allied Finance Company. The Allied Finance Company associated with that organisation that, in my view, unwisely sought to assimilate the assets of those two discredited businessmen, Eric Watson and Mark Hodgkin. They, however, can wait for another day. Sir, why this bill is important, if you look at a case like Allied Finance, where the actual investors are highly likely to recover most of their money by dint of a Treasury guarantee, but it raises a question as to the quality of stewardship that will be shown by such a receiver in that case, because there's a balance to be drawn, sir, as to how much time and energy do they exhaust in the pursuit of monies in order to satisfy creditors, and to ensure that as they exhaust time and energy, it is not to such an extent that they actually melt down the residue that might be available for the eventual injured parties, or should I say for the injured parties of the enterprise. And many of us have watched in our small provincial towns insolvency practitioners, receivers, etc., actually appointed by virtual associates, virtual friends, etc., and have conducted their affairs in such a way that you can see that whilst they're hiding behind the patina of the reputation of their profession, in actual fact they're also aiding the agenda of the people who have appointed them. So I remember several years ago the IRD brought a proposal forward, if I'm not mistaken it was the IRD and members of the accountancy profession, that in matters of receivership that there should be an unqualified ability for the statutory creditors, the statutory creditors, to zoom in and take everything. And I think that what this bill does, when it uplifts the professionalism required of being a receiver, it needs to ensure that the people who have this role draw the right balance between the time and money available to pursue monies outstanding, but also listen and treat different categories of creditors with a degree of fairness. It takes place at a time, sir, where there's an enormous amount of stress, marital discord, and, dare I say it, as we learnt in the 90s, even death. So the thought that, sir, we could have more second-hand car salesmen or people who are the friends of Eric Watson, other discredited members of the business community who have rorted over $6 billion worth of pensioners' monies, etc., through the imbroglio of the finance companies. So we must bring that to an end. And this bill seeks to do that. It's good that there's a shared level of concern between our former minister and the current minister. And I think that earlier today, sir, when we were debating the wisdom of expanding savings vehicles and improving the tax treatment of those vehicles, etc., it's all very well, sir, for us to talk about expanding savings, but if we don't have professionals that either members of the business community or members of the ordinary New Zealand community can trust, then our desire to expand the scope for business, to create new trajectories of wealth, etc., is all very well, but it won't come to pass, sir, if the people that we in society are charging to carry out these responsibilities are either not accountable, cannot be held to be accountable, or are unfit for the task. Now, receivers, sir, are only receivers, sir, are only one part, or liquidators, one part of that. There are a host of other characters who have not, sir, distinguished themselves with a great deal of success or high-quality conduct in the funds industry, in the finance industry. And I salute, sir, the architects of this bill and people bringing forward the concerns of individual constituents, firms, creditors, etc. But this is really, sir, just a small part of a broader challenge we've got in New Zealand. If we are to ensure that the conduct in our commercial sectors improves, then those who have special responsibilities of an administrative nature need to be held to a high level of accountability. I've often wondered, sir, whether or not the American model, which really moves very quickly into criminality, and we've tended, sir, in cases of egregious failure of a commercial nature, of a white-collar nature, it's often dealt with, sir, less as a criminal issue, or if it is a criminal issue, we don't ordinarily think that these people are going to go to jail. And that's a distinction that I've often drawn, sir, as I've spoken and thought about these things. In the United States of America, they tend not to dither, and the wrongdoers, the culprits, sir, are very quickly arrested, and in a remarkably short period of time are sharing, figuratively, a cell with O.J. Simpson. And I wonder, sir, as we move forward to improve the quality of administrators, that we ought to be thinking about injecting penalties of that burden, of that nature, into our law. And I've no doubt that many of the people who have been wrong, who were dodgy in the period of time of the finance company breakdowns, etc., would be facing a wider range of penalties, although a few of them are going to court, and that's up to our district court and high court judges. So we've heard from various speakers why this piece of legislation is very important. I would say to us that whilst it's important in terms of the breakdown of a company, we should see its importance also in actually buttressing and strengthening the pillars of the commercial community, the commercial sector, so that generations coming through, unsophisticated investors, creditors like a constituent who came to see me recently, a building company, sir, went broke. They hadn't taken the time, possibly didn't know that the $200,000 worth of tiles ought to have been registered prior to the appointment of a receiver. Of course, the receivers arrived. Their ability to legally secure the tiles, now that the premises are under the control of the receiver, are somewhere near zero. And what that tells me, sir, is that at a time of economic buoyancy and everyone's got a lot of money and there's lots of cash going around, we probably were sloppy, and they certainly were, but in this case they're learning a very valuable and indeed highly costly lesson, that once a receiver is appointed and you as the provider of either a service or material have goods that have not been registered, then the prospect of you getting them back, sir, not you, sir, of the party recovering them is very, very slight. So not only does this piece of legislation represent a very sensible advance forward, but it's a reminder that we've got to lift the quality and the standard of administration right across the commercial sector, certainly in the advent of a greater savings development, of a greater level of interest in our economy, for money to be put into those areas to grow the economy where there may be risk. Sir, I support this bill.
Jonathan Young.